Millionaire Charles Whitman thought money could keep his mother alive until one secret moment proved he had been slowly burying her in silence. Charles Whitman stood in the marble entrance of his Dallas mansion, buttoning his dark suit with the cold precision of a man who controlled everything. The walls were spotless, the floors shined, the air smelled like disinfectant and expensive candles. Every detail in that house obeyed him. Except his mother. Evelyn Whitman sat near the window in her wheelchair, her pale hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on nothing. Alzheimer's had taken pieces of her day by day. So Charles fought back the only way he knew how with money. Private doctors. Imported medicine. A strict diet. A whiteboard full of schedules. No salt. No sugar. No noise. No surprises. To him that was love. Then he turned to Denise Carter, the young African-American housekeeper standing quietly by the doorway. "The nurse comes at 5, he said. "Her meal is at 1. If she gets restless, give her the blue pill. Do not change anything." Denise nodded. "Yes, Mr. Whitman." But Charles did not trust her. She was too gentle, too warm. Sometimes, he heard her humming while she cleaned, as if joy had any place in that silent mansion. So Charles pretended to leave for New York. Instead, he ordered his driver around the block and slipped back through the service door. He expected to catch Denise failing. He expected negligence. But what he was about to see would crack open the frozen heart of that mansion and his own. For years, Charles Whitman believed his mother was safe because nothing touched her. Not the dust. Not the weather. Not the noise of the city. Not even life. That was the part he never allowed himself to say out loud. Evelyn Whitman did not live in that mansion anymore. She existed inside it. There was a difference, and deep down somewhere beneath the pressed suits and the polished shoes and the calendar full of meetings, Charles knew it. Every morning her bedroom curtains opened at exactly 7:15. Not 7:10. Not 7:20. The nurse had written the time on the laminated care chart taped beside the door. Morning medication came at 7:30. Warm water only, oatmeal at 8:00. No brown sugar. No butter. No fruit unless approved. Blood pressure at 9:00. Cognitive stimulation exercises at 10:00. 3 picture cards. A spoon. A house. A dog. Evelyn would stare at them with soft empty eyes while a specialist in a white coat asked, "Do you know what this is, Mrs. Whitman?" Most days she did not answer. Some days she whispered a word that belonged to another decade. Robert. That was Charles's father. And every time she said that name, Charles left the room. He told himself he was busy. He told himself he had calls. He told himself there was no use standing there waiting for a woman with Alzheimer's to recognize a son she no longer knew. But the truth was uglier. He could not bear being forgotten. So he paid other people to stand where he should have stood. A neurologist came twice a week. A nutritionist came every Monday. A physical therapist moved Evelyn's arms and legs like fragile machinery. Nurses rotated in and out of the mansion with soft shoes and quiet voices. They checked boxes. They logged symptoms. They adjusted pillows. They measured her life in ounces of water, milligrams of medicine, and minutes of sleep. Charles paid every invoice before it was due. He bought the best equipment. The wheelchair alone cost more than some used cars. The mattress was designed to prevent pressure sores. The air purifier in her room ran day and night. Even the soap in her bathroom had been recommended by a specialist in geriatric skin care. Everything was correct. Everything was sterile. Everything was dead quiet. And Evelyn sat in the middle of it all like a beautiful photograph left too long in the sun. Faded. Still. Untouched. The mansion itself had become a kind of hospital disguised as wealth. The grand staircase no one used anymore. The dining room table that could seat 16 but rarely held more than one untouched bowl of soup. The baby grand piano in the corner closed for 5 years, collecting no dust because the cleaning staff would never allow dust, but collecting silence instead. That silence had weight. It pressed against the walls. It followed Charles down the hallway. It sat beside him during breakfast while he scrolled through market reports and ignored the empty chair where his mother used to sit with coffee and toast, telling him he worked too hard. Back then, Evelyn had been sharp. Sharp enough to argue with him. Sharp enough to catch him lying. Sharp enough to walk into his office without knocking, put one hand on her hip and say, "Charles, you are not too important to call your mother." He used to roll his eyes. Now he would have paid any amount of money to hear that sentence one more time. But he would not admit that. Not to the doctors. Not to the staff. Not to himself. Instead, he built rules. Rules were easier than grief. No loud music. It could agitate her. No visitors without approval. Too much stimulation. No strong smells. They might confuse her. No family photographs in the main room. They sometimes made her cry. No old songs. The neurologist said emotional memory could trigger distress. So Charles removed anything that carried a heartbeat. The framed wedding photo of Evelyn and Robert disappeared from the mantel. The old recipe cards vanished from the kitchen drawer. The floral tablecloth Evelyn had loved was replaced with smooth white linen. Her favorite yellow curtains were taken down because Charles thought the color looked cheap against the new interior design. He did not call it erasing her. He called it helping. And the professionals agreed with him just enough to make him feel righteous. She needs consistency, they said. She needs calm. She needs routine. Charles heard what he wanted to hear. Control. Control was calm. Control was care. Control was love. So when Evelyn refused food, he ordered a new nutrition plan. When she cried at night, he approved a stronger sedative. When she pushed a nurse's hand away, he called it hostility. When she stared toward the kitchen and whispered Friday, he marked it down as confusion. He never asked why Friday mattered. He did not remember. Or maybe he did. Maybe he simply buried it. Because Friday had once been pizza night. Years ago, before the marble floors and the locked medicine cabinet and the private doctors, the Whitman family had been loud on Fridays. Robert would come home with 2 cardboard boxes balanced in his arms. Evelyn would pretend to scold him for ordering extra cheese again. Charles, still a boy then, would steal pepperoni from the slices before anyone sat down. His mother would laugh. His father would say, "Leave some for the rest of us, Charlie." And the whole kitchen would smell like melted cheese, toasted crust, garlic, and home. But in the mansion Charles ruled now, home had been replaced by protocol. At 1:00 p.m., Evelyn was supposed to eat vegetable puree without salt. At 4:00 p.m., she was supposed to drink a liquid supplement. At 6:00 p.m., she was supposed to sit through 30 minutes of soft instrumental music approved by her care team. At 8:00 p.m., the blue pill. If she became restless, another pill. If she became difficult, call the doctor. If she became too much, call emergency services. That was the plan. That was always the plan. And then came Denise Carter. Denise did not move through the mansion like the others. The nurses moved carefully, professionally, watching clocks and charts. Denise moved like she was listening to the house. She noticed things that were not written down. The way Evelyn's fingers twitched when an old melody played faintly from the kitchen radio. The way her eyes shifted toward sunlight when the curtains opened. The way her face softened when Denise called her Miss Evelyn instead of Mrs. Whitman. Small things. Human things. Things Charles had stopped seeing. Denise had first been hired for the night cleaning shift. She was not part of the medical team. She did not have framed certificates. She did not use long words. She carried her own lunch in a brown paper bag and wore comfortable shoes because she worked 2 jobs most weeks. Charles saw that and decided he understood her. He did not. He saw a housekeeper. Evelyn saw warmth. On Denise's 3rd week, she found Evelyn awake in the dark at 2:00 a.m., sitting upright in bed with tears rolling down her cheeks. The night nurse was in the hallway logging medication. Denise stepped inside quietly. "Miss Evelyn," she whispered. The old woman did not answer. Her lips moved. One word. "Hungry." The chart said no solid food after 7:00. The chart said offer water. The chart said redirect. Denise looked at the chart. Then she looked at Evelyn. Not the patient. The woman. She sat beside her and said, "What are you hungry for, honey?" Evelyn blinked. For a moment nothing happened. Then her mouth trembled. "Cheese," she whispered. Denise did not laugh. She did not correct her. She did not call it confusion. She simply nodded as if Evelyn had made all the sense in the world. "Cheese sounds good," Denise said. That was the first crack in Charles Whitman's perfect system. Not a rebellion. Not yet. Just a woman hearing another woman. And sometimes that is where miracles begin. Charles Whitman did not trust Denise Carter. Not from the first day. Not from the first hour. Something about her unsettled him. She was too quiet in the wrong ways, too present in the right ones. She did not glide through the mansion like a trained nurse trying not to disturb the furniture. She walked like a person entering a home. She noticed light. She noticed cold coffee. She noticed when Evelyn's blanket had slipped from her knees by half an inch. And Charles noticed Denise noticing. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The first time he saw Denise kneel beside his mother's chair, he stopped halfway down the hall. He had been on a call with an investor in Boston, one hand pressed to his Bluetooth earpiece, the other holding a folder of quarterly projections. His voice was calm. His shoes made no sound on the polished floor. Then he heard it. A hum. Soft. Warm. Barely there. Denise was humming an old church tune while folding a pale blue blanket over Evelyn's lap. Not loud. Not careless. Just enough sound to fill the empty space between two human beings. Charles froze. In that mansion, sound had rules. The television could play only approved programs. No shouting. No singing. No sudden laughter. No music unless it came from the tablet loaded with slow piano tracks the neurologist recommended. But Denise hummed like she had not been handed those rules. Like she had not asked permission from grief. Evelyn's head had turned slightly toward the sound. That small movement hit Charles harder than it should have. "Hold on," he said into the phone. He lowered his voice. "Denise?" She looked up at once. "Yes, Mr. Whitman. Is there a reason you're singing?" The question came out sharper than he intended. Denise stood slowly smoothing the front of her light blue uniform. She did not look guilty. That made him angrier. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "I didn't realize I was bothering anyone." "This is not about bothering anyone. My mother needs quiet." Denise glanced at Evelyn, whose fingers had stopped tapping against the arm of her chair. "Yes, sir." Charles waited for more. An excuse? A complaint? A nervous apology? Denise gave him none. She only nodded once and stepped back. That was the first note Charles wrote down in his mind. Too informal. Too comfortable. Too close. By the end of the week there were more. The pillow behind Evelyn's back was different. The white orthopedic wedge approved by the physical therapist had been replaced by a softer yellow cushion from the upstairs guest room. Charles found it during his evening check and lifted it with 2 fingers as though it were evidence from a crime scene. "Who put this here?" The day nurse looked confused. Denise, who was wiping the side table, answered calmly. "I did." Charles turned. "The wedge is on the care plan." "Yes, sir. But it was hurting her shoulder. The therapist prescribed that support." Denise paused. Just half a second. Then she said, "Miss Evelyn kept trying to move away from it." Charles stared at her. "Miss Evelyn? Not Mrs. Whitman. Not the patient. Miss Evelyn?" Again too close. "My mother has advanced Alzheimer's," he said. "She does not always know what is best for her body." Denise folded the cleaning cloth in her hand. "No, sir. But she still knows when something hurts." The room went still. The nurse stopped writing. Evelyn stared at the window. Charles felt something hot move up his neck. He was used to people agreeing with him. In boardrooms. In restaurants. In his own house. Especially in his own house. But Denise had not argued loudly. She had done something worse. She had spoken gently and made him feel cruel. He put the wedge back into place himself. "Follow the plan," he said. Denise lowered her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Whitman." But the next morning when Charles passed the sitting room, the yellow cushion was back. Not exactly where it had been before. Tucked lower this time. Supporting Evelyn without straining her shoulder. Charles stood there for a long breath, his jaw tight. No one saw him. No one saw the way his hand closed around the stair rail. No one saw how badly he wanted to call the agency and have Denise removed before lunch. But he did not. Not yet. Because the truth was inconvenient. His mother seemed calmer when Denise was in the room. That irritated him. It irritated him because it made no sense. Denise had no medical degree, no specialist training, no polished resume. She had started as the night cleaner after 2 certified caregivers quit within the same month. One cried in the kitchen and said Evelyn was too difficult. Another left a note on the counter beside the medication log and never came back. Charles had been desperate. Denise had offered to cover extra hours. "I helped care for my auntie when she got sick," she told the house manager. "I'm not a nurse, but I'm patient." Patient. Charles almost laughed when he heard that. Patience did not manage neurodegenerative decline. Patience did not prevent falls. Patience did not regulate blood pressure or medication schedules or liability exposure. But the agency was short-staffed and his next round of interviews would take 3 days. So he agreed. Temporarily. That was the word he used. Temporary. Yet every day Denise stayed. Every day, Evelyn resisted the nurses but softened when Denise came near. Every day, Charles saw one more thing he could not explain. One afternoon he walked in and found the television changed from the financial channel he always left on low volume to an old black and white movie. Evelyn was watching the screen with a faint curve at the corner of her mouth. Charles reached for the remote. "Who changed this?" Denise was arranging fresh towels in the cabinet. "I did, sir." "Why?" "She seemed to like it. She seemed to like it." His voice cracked like a whip. Denise turned around. On the screen, an actress in a satin dress stepped into a ballroom. Music swelled softly from the speakers. Denise said. She smiled when it came on. "My mother does not need random stimulation." "It wasn't random," Denise said. Again quiet. Again careful. Again unbearable. She said his name. Charles's hand tightened around the remote. "What name?" "Robert." That name changed the room. Even the air seemed to hold still. Evelyn's late husband. Charles's father. Dead 5 years. Buried under a gray stone in a cemetery Charles paid to keep immaculate but rarely visited. Denise looked toward Evelyn. She said Robert liked this one. So I left it on. Charles looked at his mother. For a second he almost saw it. A flicker. A small warmth in her face. Not recognition exactly. Something more fragile. Like a candle behind frosted glass. Then he crushed the feeling before it could reach him. Turn it off after 10 minutes, he said. Denise nodded. Yes, sir. But Charles did not leave right away. He stood in the doorway watching his mother watch a movie she may or may not have remembered. Watching Denise stand nearby, not hovering, not forcing conversation, simply being there. And he hated that it looked like peace. He hated that the peace had not come from him. That evening Charles called Dr. Marcus Bell, his mother's neurologist. I'm concerned about the new caregiver, he said. Dr. Bell's voice came through the car speakers, smooth and expensive. Has there been an incident? Not exactly. What kind of concern? Charles looked out at the long driveway through the windshield of his parked SUV. She improvises. There was a pause. In what way? She changes pillows. She hums. She talks to my mother too much. She lets her watch old movies. She uses emotional triggers. The doctor sighed softly. Familiar music and memory cues can sometimes create brief, positive responses. Charles frowned. That is not what you told me before. What I told you, Dr. Bell said carefully, is that overstimulation can cause distress. But emotional memory is complicated. In some patients, familiar sensory cues, songs, smells, routines may comfort them. Charles did not like that answer. It had too much room in it. Too much uncertainty. He paid doctors to remove uncertainty. So you're saying I should let the housekeeper run her own treatment plan? No. I'm saying observe. If your mother is calmer, it may be worth noting. Charles ended the call with a polite goodbye and sat in silence. Observe. In fine. He would observe. And he did. He began checking the medication logs twice a day. He counted pills. He inspected the food waste. He reviewed pantry shelves. He asked the nurses if Denise had violated instructions. He looked for proof. The blue pill bothered him most. Twice in 1 week it remained untouched in the compartment. When he asked Denise why, she said, she calmed down before she needed it. That is not your decision. I understand. Do you? Denise looked tired that day. Not careless. Tired. There were shadows under her eyes and a small bandage on one finger from some kitchen cut she had not mentioned. She was upset because the room was too dark, Denise said. I opened the curtains. Sat with her. She settled. Charles stared at her. The pill is there for agitation. Yes, sir. Use it. Denise's mouth tightened. Just barely. But Charles saw it. There it was. Resistance. Hidden under politeness. He stepped closer. You are not family, Denise. The words landed harder than he expected. Denise did not flinch, but her eyes changed. I know that, Mr. Whitman. This is a medical environment. She looked around the room. At the white walls. At the locked cabinet. At Evelyn sleeping in her chair, thin hands resting under a folded blanket. Then Denise said almost too softly. It used to be her home. Charles said nothing. Because for one brutal second he had no answer. Then his phone rang. A meeting. A number with too many zeros attached. He took the call and walked away. But Denise's words followed him down the hall. It used to be her home. By Thursday night, suspicion had hardened inside him into a plan. He told himself it was responsibility. He told himself he was protecting his mother. He told himself Denise Carter was dangerous because she was emotional and emotional people broke rules. But beneath all of that, in a place Charles refused to look at, there was another truth. Denise had reached a part of Evelyn he could not reach. And Charles Whitman could forgive incompetence. He could punish disobedience. He could replace staff. But he did not know what to do with a poor young housekeeper who seemed to understand his mother better than he did. So he decided to catch her. Not with a warning. Not with a conversation. A trap. Clean. Quiet. Controlled. The kind of trap a man like Charles Whitman knew how to build. And when it closed, he believed Denise Carter would be the one standing exposed. He had no idea the person about to be revealed was himself. Charles Whitman did not sleep that Thursday night. He lay in his bedroom on the second floor, staring at the dark ceiling while the mansion breathed around him in perfect silence. No footsteps. No voices. No music. No laughter. Just the low hum of the air conditioning and the soft mechanical click of security cameras turning in their corners. That house had cost him $18 million. And still, for the first time in years, Charles felt like a stranger inside it. Denise Carter's words kept coming back. It used to be her home. He turned onto his side. Closed his eyes. Opened them again. There was no escaping it. He saw his mother sitting in that chair by the window, wrapped in the yellow cushion Denise had smuggled back into place. He saw her fingers moving slightly when Denise hummed, He saw the way her face softened at the sound of Robert's name. Robert Whitman. His father. A man who had never needed a calendar reminder to sit beside his wife. A man who burned toast, forgot appointments, laughed too loudly, and somehow made Evelyn feel loved every single day. Charles swallowed hard. Then he sat up. No. This was not about guilt. This was about safety. That was what he told himself as he reached for the tablet on his nightstand and opened the home monitoring system. 16 cameras appeared on the screen. Front gate, driveway, kitchen, main hall, dining room, living room, medication room, upstairs corridor. Every part of the mansion watched, recorded, controlled. Except the parts Charles had never learned how to see. He tapped the kitchen feed. Empty. He tapped the living room. Evelyn slept in her chair under a blanket, her head tilted slightly to one side. Denise sat nearby with a folded towel in her lap, awake, watching over her. Not scrolling on her phone. Not sleeping. Watching. Charles frowned. That should have reassured him. It did not. At 6:00 a.m., he was already dressed. Dark suit. White shirt. Silver cufflinks. No tie yet. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, shaving with short, hard strokes, his jaw tight. His flight to New York was scheduled for 1115. A real flight. A real meeting. A real reason to leave. But he had no intention of getting on that plane. Not at first. Not until he knew. At 7:10 he walked downstairs. The mansion smelled like coffee and polished wood. Outside, the Texas morning sun was just beginning to burn through the pale sky. The lawn crew had already arrived, moving silently beyond the glass walls like figures in a painting. Denise was in the kitchen rinsing a cup. She turned when he entered. "Good morning, Mr. Whitman." Charles did not answer right away. His eyes moved past her to the counter. No food out of place. No bags. No containers. No signs of disobedience. "Where is my mother?" "In the sitting room," Denise said. "She woke up early." She seemed calm. Seemed? Denise held his gaze for 1 second, then lowered it. "She is calm." Charles stepped closer to the counter. Her blood pressure. Checked at 645. 132/78. Medication. Given at 7. The blue pill. Denise paused. Charles noticed. She said. She did not need it this morning. His face hardened. "It is prescribed as needed." "Yes, sir." "And who decides when it is needed?" Denise placed the cup carefully in the drying rack. There was no clatter. No drama. Just the small, controlled sound of a woman choosing every move wisely. "The chart says agitation, pacing, crying, or physical resistance," she said. She had none of those. Charles stared at her. There it was again. Not rebellion loud enough to punish. Not obedience complete enough to trust. Something in between. Something human. He hated it. "My flight leaves in a few hours," he said. "Yes, sir. I'll be gone until Friday evening." Denise nodded. "We'll take good care of her." "We?" That word scraped against him. "We?" Charles asked. Denise blinked. "The staff, sir." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he gave a thin smile that did not reach his eyes. "Of course." At 8:30, Dr. Marcus Bell's office called to confirm a home visit for the following week. Charles approved it. At 9:00, the nutritionist sent a revised meal plan. Charles printed it himself and taped it to the kitchen whiteboard. Vegetable puree at 1:00. No salt. Liquid supplement at 4:00. No solid foods without physician approval. Avoid emotional overstimulation. Monitor swallowing. Report irregular behavior. He underlined the last line twice. Denise stood at the far end of the kitchen wiping an already clean counter. Charles knew she saw him. Good. Let her see. Let her understand there were rules in this house. At 10:15 he entered the sitting room. Evelyn sat near the window in her pale yellow blouse. The sunlight fell across her silver hair, her hands rested on the blanket. She looked fragile, distant, almost weightless. Charles stopped a few feet away. "Mother." Her eyes moved slowly toward him. No recognition. No smile. Nothing? Just the blank, soft confusion that always made something inside him cave in. He cleared his throat. "I'm leaving for New York." Evelyn stared at him. A small line formed between her brows. For half a second Charles thought she might speak. She did not. He looked away first. Denise stood beside the bookshelf holding a stack of folded linens. "She had a good morning," Denise said softly. Charles turned on her. "I did not ask." The room went cold. Denise's mouth closed. Evelyn's fingers twitched against the blanket. Charles felt it immediately. The ugliness of his own tone. But pride was faster than shame. He adjusted his cuff link. "If anything happens, you call Dr. Bell first, then me? If she refuses food, do not improvise. If she gets upset, follow the medication plan. If she asks for something inappropriate, redirect her." Denise nodded. "Yes, Mr. Whitman." He stepped toward the door, then stopped. "And Denise?" "Yes, sir." No singing. The words hung there. Small. Cruel. Ridiculous. Denise looked at him. Not angry. Not wounded. Worse. Disappointed. "Yes, sir," she said. At 1040, Charles picked up his leather briefcase from the entry table. The driver, Paul Jenkins, waited outside beside the black SUV, rear door open. Paul had worked for Charles for 9 years and had learned the most important rule of the job. Do not ask unnecessary questions. Charles walked down the front steps without looking back. The sun struck the windows of the mansion, turning them into mirrors. For a moment he saw himself in the glass. Dark suit. Perfect posture. A man leaving a house where his mother sat alone with people he paid to love her. His mouth tightened. He got into the SUV. "Airport, Mr. Whitman?" Paul asked. Charles looked down at his watch. "Iling San." Then he said, "Not yet." Paul's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "Only once." "Sir." "Drive around the block, then take the service road behind the property. Park near the east gate. Keep the engine off." Paul hesitated for less than a second. "Yes, sir." The SUV pulled away from the mansion gates and rolled beneath the shade of old oak trees. Charles sat in the backseat, briefcase beside him, tablet in his lap. His pulse was steady. His mind was clear. He had built companies this way. Quietly. Strategically. Find the weakness. Remove the weakness. No emotion. No hesitation. But as the SUV turned onto the service road, something tightened in his chest. Not doubt. He refused to call it doubt. At the east gate, Paul parked under a line of trees where the cameras would not catch the vehicle from the front drive. The engine shut off. The sudden silence inside the SUV felt thick and hot. Charles opened the security app. Then stopped. If the cameras were active, Denise might see the red indicator lights. If she suspected surveillance, she would behave. And Charles did not want her careful. He wanted her exposed. One by one he disabled the interior feeds. Kitchen. Dining room. Sitting room. Hallway. Medication room. Each screen went black. $16 million of security turned blind by the man who trusted no one. Charles stared at the dark tablet. Then slipped it into his briefcase. "Stay here," he told Paul. "Yes, sir. If anyone calls, I'm on the way to the airport." Paul nodded. Charles opened the door slowly and stepped out. The heat hit him first. Sharp, dry, rising from the pavement. Somewhere beyond the wall a lawnmower droned. A dog barked once, then stopped. Charles walked along the side path toward the service entrance, keeping close to the hedges. His leather shoes pressed softly against the stone walkway. In one hand he held his briefcase. In the other the master key. He had not used that door in years. Staff used it. Deliveries used it. People who came and went without disturbing the front of the house used it. Now Charles stood before it like a thief outside his own mansion. He slid the key into the lock. The metal turned with a tiny click. He paused. Listened. Nothing. Then he opened the door and stepped inside. The laundry room was dim. Cool air brushed his face. The faint smell of detergent hung over the machines. A basket of folded towels sat on the counter, each one stacked with Denise's neat, careful hands. Charles moved past them. Slowly. No footsteps loud enough to announce him. No cough. No clearing his throat. For once he did not want the house to know he was there. He passed the pantry. The staff hallway. The back entrance to the kitchen. Everything looked normal. Too normal. That irritated him. He had expected to find obvious evidence. A missed medication. A phone call. A visitor. Some small act of negligence that would confirm what he already believed. Instead, the house held its breath. At 1258, Charles reached the shadowed corridor outside the kitchen. 2 minutes before the scheduled meal. Perfect. He stood still, hidden behind the wall, and waited. At 1:00 p.m., his mother was supposed to receive vegetable puree without salt. At 1:00 p.m., Denise Carter was supposed to follow the chart. At 1:00 p.m., Charles Whitman would learn the truth. Then it reached him. A smell. Warm. Rich. Impossible. Not steamed vegetables. Not supplement powder. Not disinfectant. Cheese. Garlic. Toasted bread. Pepperoni. Charles's nostrils flared. His grip tightened around the briefcase handle until his knuckles turned white. No. She would not dare. But the smell grew stronger, curling through the hallway like a memory that had escaped its cage. Hot cheese. Tomato sauce. Crisp crust. The kind of smell that belonged to Friday nights long buried. The kind of smell that had no place in a medical schedule. Charles took one step forward. His face darkened. He had her now. He could already see the lawsuit. The termination. The agency complaint. The medical report. The ruined references. Denise Carter would never work in a private home again. He moved toward the dining room, rage rising hot in his throat. Then a sound stopped him cold. Not a crash. Not a scream. Not choking. Laughter. Bright. Deep. Unmistakable. Charles froze 1 yard from the doorway. The briefcase slipped slightly in his hand. His breath caught. Because that laugh did not belong to Denise. It belonged to Evelyn Whitman, his mother. And Charles had not heard it in 5 years. The smell hit Charles Whitman like an insult. Cheese. Pepperoni. Hot grease. Garlic baked into crust. It rolled through the hallway of his mansion and wrapped itself around the white walls, the marble floors, the cold furniture, the $1,000 air diffusers. It did not belong there. Not in this house. Not at 1 o'clock. Not anywhere near Evelyn Whitman. His mother had a weak heart. That was the first thought. Not her laugh. Not the sound he had not heard in 5 years. The first thought was medical. Salt. Fat. Cholesterol. Blood pressure. Risk. Dr. Marcus Bell's warnings snapped through his mind like emergency lights. No high-sodium foods, Mr. Whitman. No processed meats. No heavy dairy. Any sudden change in diet could trigger distress. Charles had memorized every word. He had repeated them to every nurse, every caregiver, every person who stepped inside that mansion. He had underlined the meal plan. He had posted it in the kitchen. He had paid professionals to build a wall between his mother and anything that might harm her. And now Denise Carter had brought pizza into his house. Pizza. The kind of food his mother had not been allowed to touch in years. His jaw locked. His hand tightened around the leather handle of his briefcase. The knuckles turned pale. A vein pulsed at his temple. She had crossed the line. Not nudged it. Not misunderstood it. Crossed it with both feet. Charles stood in the shadowed hallway outside the dining room, breathing through his nose, forcing himself not to storm in too soon. He wanted the full picture. He wanted proof. Clear proof. No excuses. No soft explanations. No talk about comfort or memory or Miss Evelyn. He wanted Denise exposed. And there it was. The smell alone was enough. He could already hear himself on the phone with the agency. Immediate termination. Negligent endangerment. Violation of medical instructions. He could see the email to Dr. Bell. He could see the legal letter. He could see Denise Carter standing in the foyer holding her purse, eyes lowered, finally understanding that warmth did not outrank authority in Charles Whitman's house. Then the laughter came again. Evelyn's laughter. It slipped through the dining room doorway and struck him in the chest. Not a weak chuckle. Not a confused sound. A real laugh. Full. Bright. A little raspy at the edges. The exact laugh that used to fill their old kitchen when his father burned toast and pretended he meant to do it. Charles stopped breathing. For 1 second, the rage lost its footing. Just one. Then he crushed it. No. This was not a miracle. This was danger disguised as happiness. A sick woman could laugh before a stroke. A confused patient could smile while being harmed. People made terrible decisions under the cover of emotion every day. He knew that. He had built a career watching charming people ruin companies with bad judgment. Denise was not saving his mother. She was risking her life. He took another step toward the dining room. The smell grew stronger. Melted cheese, sharp and thick. Pepperoni, oily and spiced. Tomato sauce, sweet and warm. It crawled under his skin. And with it came something else. A memory. Friday night. A much smaller house. A round kitchen table with scratches in the wood. His father Robert walking through the back door with 2 cardboard pizza boxes balanced on one arm, rain dripping from his coat. Evelyn laughing, Robert, I told you 1 pizza was enough. Robert winking, not with Charlie in the house. Young Charles, maybe 9 years old, already reaching for the box before his father set it down. Wash your hands, Evelyn would say. After 1 piece, Charles would beg. No, sir. Then he would sneak a slice of pepperoni anyway, and his mother would pretend not to see. The memory flashed so sharply that Charles almost staggered. He hated it. He hated how quickly it came. He hated that the smell could do in 1 second what doctors' money and machines had failed to do for years. He pushed the memory away and stepped closer. From where he stood hidden by the wall, he could not see the whole room yet. Only the edge of the dining table. Sunlight across polished wood. A white plate. A paper napkin. Paper. Not the linen napkins from the cabinet. Paper napkins like some cheap diner. Charles's mouth tightened. Then he heard Denise's voice. Careful now, Miss Evelyn. It's hot. Soft. Warm. Too familiar. Evelyn answered. Actually answered. Oh, I know. Robert always burned the roof of his mouth because he couldn't wait. Charles froze. The sentence was complete. Clear. Not a mumble. Not a broken sound. A sentence. His mother's voice was thin, but the meaning was there. The rhythm was there. The little teasing lift at the end was there. Charles stared at the floor. His body did not know what to do with what his ears had just heard. For weeks Evelyn had barely spoken. She had drifted through rooms like a shadow. She had stared at walls. She had called nurses by dead names. Some mornings she did not seem to understand what a spoon was. And now she was talking about Robert burning his mouth on pizza. Because Denise Carter had ignored the chart. Because Denise Carter had broken the rules. Because Denise Carter had done the one thing Charles would never have approved. His shame flickered. His anger smothered it. No. A moment of clarity did not justify recklessness. He pictured his mother's blood pressure climbing, her pulse racing, her frail body trying to digest greasy food. He pictured ambulance lights against the mansion windows, paramedics running in, Dr. Bell asking what she had eaten. Denise standing there speechless. He would not let it happen. He would stop it now. Charles lifted his foot to enter the room. Then Denise spoke again. Do you want a smaller piece? Evelyn made a little sound of protest. No. Don't you dare cut it like hospital food. Denise laughed softly. All right, big piece it is. Hospital food? The word stung. Charles looked toward the kitchen where the printed meal plan hung on the whiteboard. Vegetable puree? No salt. Liquid supplement. Monitor swallowing. His rules. His mother's prison. No. He clenched his teeth. That was not fair. He had done what the doctors told him. He had followed science. He had protected her from risk. A son who did nothing would be cruel. A son who controlled everything was responsible. Wasn't he? The answer did not come. Instead, another sound reached him. A small clink of porcelain. A chair shifting. Evelyn inhaling with pleasure. Oh, she whispered. That smells like home. Charles's hand loosened around the briefcase. Just slightly. Home. Denise said, I thought you might like it. You remembered, Evelyn murmured. I listened. 2 words. I listened. They landed harder than an accusation. Charles had spoken to doctors. He had spoken to nurses. He had spoken to nutritionists, pharmacists, insurance managers, agency directors, legal consultants. He had spoken around his mother for years. Denise had listened to her. The thought made him furious because it made him small. He stepped into the edge of the doorway still half hidden in shadow. And then he saw it. The dining room was alive. That was the only word. Alive. The tall curtains had been opened wide and afternoon sunlight spilled across the room in warm gold. Not the cold filtered light Charles preferred to protect the furniture but real sunlight. Bold, reckless, beautiful. The long dining table, usually empty and polished like a museum piece, held 2 cardboard pizza boxes. One was open. Steam curled from it. A silver spatula rested beside a stack of paper napkins, 2 glasses of water stood near the plates. And there was Evelyn. Not slumped in her wheelchair. Not sedated. Not staring through the wall. She sat upright in a dining chair with a cushion behind her back. Her pale yellow blouse caught the sunlight. Her silver hair had been brushed neatly away from her face. Her glasses sat straight on her nose. She held a slice of pizza with both hands. Her fingers were thin, fragile, spotted with age. There was a little smear of sauce near her thumb. Charles felt a strange panic rise in him. Not because she looked sick. Because she looked happy. Denise stood beside her, one hand hovering near the plate ready to help but not taking over. Her blue uniform was clean. Her hair was pinned back. Her expression was careful, tender, focused. Not careless. Not negligent. That almost made Charles angrier. If Denise had been lazy, he could punish her. If she had been foolish, he could dismiss her. But she looked like someone guarding a sacred moment. And still the pizza sat there. A loaded weapon made of dough and cheese. Charles's eyes locked on the pepperoni. Greasy circles shining under the sun. Too much salt. Too much fat. Too much risk. He imagined the cardiologist's voice. This is exactly what we warned against. His rage returned, but now it trembled at the edges. He was about to step forward. He was about to say her name like a verdict. Denise. He could feel the word forming in his throat. Then Evelyn lifted the slice, took a careful bite and closed her eyes. The room went still. Denise watched her closely. Charles watched from the shadows. Evelyn chewed slowly. A tiny smile spread across her face. Not vague. Not confused. Real. When she opened her eyes, they shone. Oh, Robert, she whispered. Charles felt the floor shift beneath him, his father's name. Not as a random fragment. Not as a symptom. As a memory. Evelyn smiled at the slice in her hands, then looked toward Denise. Every Friday, she said. He brought it home every Friday. Extra cheese for me? Pepperoni for Charlie? That boy would pick it clean before dinner started. Denise smiled. Sounds like Charlie loved his pepperoni. He did, Evelyn said and laughed again. Greedy little thing? Charles stood in the doorway, hidden and exposed at the same time. His mother remembered him. Not the man in the suit. Not the stranger who checked her blood pressure logs. She remembered the boy. The boy with greasy fingers. The boy at the kitchen table. The boy she once laughed with. And for the first time in years, Charles Whitman did not know whether he wanted to shout, cry or run. Charles Whitman stood in the doorway and forgot how to breathe. For a moment the mansion disappeared. The marble floors. The glass walls. The locked medicine cabinet. The printed meal plan taped to the kitchen board. All of it fell away. There was only his mother at the dining table holding a slice of pizza with both hands, smiling like the woman he had spent 5 years mourning while she was still alive. Evelyn Whitman was not staring into emptiness now. She was not curled into herself. She was not mumbling at shadows or drifting behind a fog Charles could not reach. She was sitting straight, shoulders lifted, chin slightly raised, eyes bright behind her glasses. Sunlight fell across her pale yellow blouse and made the room glow around her. The dining chair seemed too large for her thin body, but somehow she looked stronger than she had that morning. More present. More real. Alive. Terribly alive. Denise Carter stood close by, not hovering, not controlling, just watching with a quiet tenderness that made Charles's throat tighten. Careful, Miss Evelyn, Denise said. Small bites. Evelyn gave her a look. A real look. The kind of look mothers give when they are being fussed over and do not appreciate it. I raised a son, Evelyn said. I know how to eat pizza. Denise laughed. Not loudly. Just enough. A soft burst of warmth. And Evelyn laughed with her. Charles felt the sound go through him like a knife. That laugh had once been the weather of his childhood. It had filled kitchens, hallways, car rides, Christmas mornings. It had floated over burned dinners and bad report cards and his father's terrible jokes. Then year by year illness had stolen it. Grief had buried it. Charles had accepted its absence the way people accept winter. But now it was here. In his dining room. Because of a pizza box. Because of Denise. Because of everything Charles had forbidden. He stayed half hidden in the shadow of the doorway, unable to step forward, unable to step back. Evelyn lifted the slice again. The cheese stretched in a thin golden ribbon from the box to her plate. Denise caught it with the spatula and guided it down before it could fall on Evelyn's blouse. There we go, Denise said. Saved it. Evelyn smiled. Robert used to say the cheese string was the best part. He sounds like he knew what he was talking about. Oh, he did. Evelyn's eyes softened. He always ordered extra cheese. Said life was too short for dry pizza. Charles closed his eyes. His father had said that. Exactly that. Life is too short for dry pizza. Robert Whitman had said it with a grin, standing in their old kitchen shaking rain from his coat while young Charles complained he was starving. Charles had not thought of that sentence in decades. It had been buried beneath earnings calls, acquisitions, funerals, medical charts, and all the heavy furniture of adulthood. Yet here it was. Whole. Untouched. Pulled back into the light by a smell. By a taste. By a moment no doctor had prescribed. Evelyn took another bite and chewed slowly. Her eyes closed, her shoulders relaxed. She made a tiny sound of pleasure, almost embarrassed by it. Denise leaned closer. Good. Evelyn opened her eyes. Better than good, she whispered. It tastes like Friday. Charles gripped the doorframe. Friday. That word again. For months he had heard her say it in fragments. Friday. Robert. Cheese. Charlie. He had called it confusion. He had marked it as decline. He had told the nurses to redirect her. Now he understood. She had not been lost in nonsense. She had been calling for a door. And no one had opened it. No one but Denise. Evelyn wiped the corner of her mouth with a paper napkin. Denise handed her. It was clumsy but dignified. She did it herself. Charles noticed that too. With the nurses she often resisted. With him she withdrew. But with Denise she tried. That hurt him in a place pride could not protect. Denise poured water into a glass and placed it near Evelyn's hand. Take a sip, honey. Evelyn did. No coughing. No panic. No collapse. Just a careful sip of water. Then she sat back and looked around the room as though seeing it for the first time in years. This table, she said softly. Denise followed her gaze. It's beautiful. Evelyn ran her fingers over the polished wood. Her touch was light, almost reverent. Robert bought it when Charles made his first real money, she said. I told him it was too big, too fancy. He said, one day this table will be full. Her voice trembled. Charles did too. The table had not been full in years. Not with family. Not with love. Only papers. Contracts. Flowers arranged by staff. Untouched bowls of puree. Evelyn looked down at her plate and for a second the brightness in her face dimmed. He was a good boy, she said. Denise's expression changed. She understood before Charles did. Who was? My Charlie. Charles's chest caved inward. Evelyn smiled but tears gathered in her eyes. He used to take all the pepperoni. Thought I didn't see? She shook her head slowly. Mothers see everything. Denise sat beside her now. Not across from her. Beside her. I bet he loved you very much. Evelyn looked toward the windows. Sunlight reflected in her wet eyes. He was always busy, she said. Even as a child. Always building something. Always trying to win. She paused. He hated losing. Charles stared at the floor. Yes. He had hated losing. He had hated losing games, arguments, deals, control. And when Alzheimer's came for his mother, he treated it like one more enemy to defeat. With money. With schedules. With specialists. With rules. But the disease had not fought like a business rival. It had not cared about his fortune. It had not respected his discipline. It had taken what it wanted. And when Charles could not win, he had done the only thing left. He had made the battlefield quiet. Evelyn dabbed her napkin beneath one eye. He doesn't visit much, she whispered. Charles flinched. He was there every day. He paid for everything. He checked every report. He stood in that house, gave instructions, approved medications, signed forms. But he did not visit. Not really. He managed her. He did not sit with her. Denise reached for Evelyn's hand. He's probably scared, she said gently. Evelyn looked at her. Scared? Sometimes people don't know what to do with pain. So they make rules around it. Charles felt the words land in the room like a verdict. Denise did not know he was listening. She was not performing. She was not trying to shame him. That made it worse. Evelyn squeezed Denise's hand. Are you married, dear? Denise smiled faintly. No, ma'am? Good. Don't marry a man who only knows how to work. Denise laughed and Evelyn laughed again, but there was sadness under it now. A thin blue line of sadness. Charles wanted to enter. He wanted to say, I'm here. He wanted to say, Mother, I'm right here. But he did not trust his voice. He did not trust his face. He did not trust what might break if she looked at him and saw only a stranger. So he stayed in the shadow. Coward. The word came from somewhere deep inside him. Not loud. Not dramatic. True. Denise picked up the spatula and slid another small piece onto Evelyn's plate. Just a little more, she said. Then we'll stop. Evelyn nodded. I don't want to be trouble. You're not trouble. I used to cook, Evelyn said suddenly. Denise smiled. What did you make? Oh, everything. Evelyn's face brightened again. Pot roast, peach cobbler, chicken and dumplings. Robert said my dumplings could fix a bad day. I believe it. And Charlie liked pancakes with chocolate chips. Too many chocolate chips. Charles almost laughed. Almost. He had forgotten that too. Sunday mornings. His mother standing at the stove. His father reading the paper. Chocolate chips melting into pancakes because Evelyn always added more when Robert said, that boy doesn't need all that sugar. She had loved him in extra chocolate chips. In stolen pepperoni. In warm towels after swimming. In notes tucked into lunchboxes. And Charles, with all his money, had repaid her with silence and vegetable puree. Evelyn lifted the pizza again, then stopped halfway. Her eyes shifted toward the doorway. Charles went still. For one terrible second he thought she saw him. Really saw him. Her gaze moved over the shadow where he stood, confused but searching. Robert, she called softly. Charles's throat closed. Denise turned slightly, but she did not see him. The sunlight was too bright behind her. The hallway was too dark. No, Miss Evelyn, Denise said gently. It's just us. Evelyn's face fell for a moment. Then she nodded. Just us. Those two words nearly broke him. Just us. In his own home. At his own dining table. With his own mother. Charles Whitman was the outsider. He had built walls so high around Evelyn's life that when warmth finally entered, it came through the service door. Denise took Evelyn's hand again. You know what she said? I think Mr. Robert would be happy you enjoyed this. Evelyn smiled. You think so? I do. He hated waste, Evelyn said, picking at the crust. He'd say, finish it, Evie. Good food is a blessing. Denise nodded. Then we won't waste it. The old woman laughed. And Charles, watching from the doorway, felt something inside him shift. Not forgiveness? Not yet. Not redemption. Something more painful. Recognition. The woman at the table was still his mother. Not all the time. Not in the way he wanted. Not in the way he could control. But she was there. In flashes. In fragments. In laughter. In the smell of pepperoni. In the word Friday. In the memory of a boy who stole toppings from pizza before dinner. Charles had spent years staring at what Alzheimer's had taken. Denise had found what it had not. And that was why the sight before him did not simply shock him. It humbled him. It stripped him down. It left him standing in a dark hallway with a briefcase in his hand, watching a housekeeper do what his millions had failed to do. She had not cured Evelyn. She had not defeated the disease. She had done something smaller. And somehow bigger. She had reached her. Evelyn took one last bite, closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart." Denise squeezed her hand. "No need to thank me, Miss Evelyn." No one asked Denise to. No one praised her. No one paid her extra for that moment. She just did it. Charles lowered his head. And for the first time that day, the rage drained out of him completely. What remained was worse. Shame. That shame did not hit Charles all at once. It came in pieces. First it was in his hands. They had stopped gripping the briefcase. The expensive leather handle hung loose against his fingers, now useless, almost foolish. This was the same briefcase he carried into boardrooms where men twice his age went silent when he entered. The same briefcase that held contracts, numbers, leverage, power. But from the shadow of that doorway, none of it mattered. Not one document inside could buy what Denise Carter had just given his mother. A smile. A memory. A reason to stay at the table a little longer. Charles swallowed, but his throat felt packed with stone. Across the dining room, Denise carefully folded the top of the pizza box closed. Not in a rush. Not with guilt. She moved slowly, giving Evelyn time to finish the moment instead of snatching it away like a nurse ending visiting hours. "Do you want to sit here a bit longer, Miss Evelyn?" Denise asked. Evelyn nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "The sun feels nice." Denise smiled. "Then we'll sit." Just that. No schedule. No command. No correction. "Then we'll sit." Charles felt the words press against him. How many times had his mother wanted to sit in sunlight and no one had let her? How many times had she looked toward a window while he ordered the curtains closed to protect the furniture? How many times had she reached for a memory while he told the staff to redirect her back to the present? The present? What a cold little word it had become. For Evelyn, the present was pills in plastic cups. Puree with no salt. Strangers checking her pulse. Her son walking past her chair with a phone in his hand, too afraid to meet her eyes. But Denise gave her something different. Not a cure. A doorway. A small warm doorway back into herself. Evelyn rested both hands on the table. Her fingers were thin, the skin almost translucent, but there was still dignity in them. Denise saw that. She never grabbed Evelyn unless she needed to. She never treated her like a broken thing. She waited. That was what Charles noticed next. Denise waited. When Evelyn reached for the water glass, Denise did not jump in and do it for her. She moved her hand close, ready if needed, but she let Evelyn try. The glass trembled. A few drops spilled onto the table. Charles almost stepped forward out of habit. Denise did not panic. "That's all right," she said softly. "Tables are made for spills." Evelyn smiled. "Not this one. Charlie paid too much for it." The sentence struck Charles like a hand across the face. Charlie. She had said Charlie. Not Mr. Whitman. Not that man. Not a stranger. Charlie. Denise's eyes warmed. "Did he?" "Oh yes," Evelyn said, glancing across the polished wood. "Always buying things too big, too shiny. Even when he was little, he wanted the biggest bike, the biggest school project, the biggest piece of cake." Denise chuckled. "Sounds like he knew what he wanted." Evelyn's smile softened. "He wanted to be seen." Charles could not move. 3 words. That was all. He wanted to be seen. His mother had not known his quarterly revenue. She had not remembered the doctors' names. She might not have known the date, the year, or the city she lived in. But somewhere inside the fog she still knew him. The boy beneath the suit, the lonely child who built towers from blocks and cried when his father left for business trips. The teenager who worked until midnight because a B+ felt like failure. The grown man who bought mansions large enough to hide inside. Denise listened like every word mattered. Not because Evelyn was rich. Not because Charles paid her. Because Evelyn was speaking. And that Denise seemed to understand was sacred. "She saw him," Denise said gently. "Mothers usually do." Evelyn turned her head toward the sunlight. For a while she said nothing. The room settled into a quiet so different from the mansion's usual silence that Charles almost did not recognize it. This silence had breath in it. This silence had peace. Then Evelyn began to hum. Very softly. A broken melody. At first Charles did not know it. The notes came unevenly, slipping in and out like someone walking through a dark room with one hand on the wall. Denise leaned closer. "That's pretty," she said. "What song is that?" Evelyn frowned a little, searching. "I don't know." Denise did not correct her. Did not push. She hummed the last few notes back. Evelyn's face changed. The smallest lift of surprise. Then she joined in. Together, the two women hummed at the dining table in the golden light, one old, one young, one drifting in and out of memory, one holding the thread steady with nothing but patience. Charles recognized the melody then. His father used to sing it badly while doing dishes. Evelyn used to throw a towel at him and say, "Robert, please, the neighbors have suffered enough." And Robert would sing louder. Charles pressed his palm to the doorframe. His knees felt weak. He had spent millions trying to keep Evelyn's body alive. Specialists, supplements, machines, controlled diets, imported medications. He had mistaken maintenance for love. Denise had brought her a song. A smell. A taste. A name. And suddenly the woman he thought was gone had reached back from the dark and touched the room. Evelyn stopped humming and looked at Denise with sudden seriousness. "You have kind eyes," she said. Denise blinked. For the first time since Charles had been watching, she looked caught off guard. "Thank you, Miss Evelyn. You remind me of someone." Denise's smile became careful. "Who?" Evelyn searched her face. Her lips parted. For a moment confusion flickered in her eyes and Charles saw the fog moving back in. He almost hated the disease for that. No, he did hate it. With a clean, helpless fury, but Denise did not chase the memory. She did not demand it. She simply covered Evelyn's hand with her own. "That's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to find it right now. You don't have to find it right now." Charles had never said anything like that to his mother. He had asked her to remember. He had asked her to eat. He had asked her to cooperate. He had asked her to be calm, be safe, be quiet, be easier for everyone around her. Denise asked nothing. She made room. And in that room Evelyn seemed less afraid. A minute passed. Then another. The sunlight shifted across the table. The pizza cooled. Somewhere in the kitchen the refrigerator clicked on. Evelyn looked down at Denise's hand covering hers. "You came back," she said. Denise's shoulders tightened slightly. "I'm here? I was afraid you wouldn't." Charles frowned from the doorway. The words had changed. The tone had changed too. Evelyn was no longer speaking to Denise as Denise. She had slipped somewhere else into some old grief Charles did not yet understand. Denise knew it. He saw it in her face. The quick flash of pain. The decision. The tenderness that followed. "I wouldn't leave you alone," Denise said. Evelyn's eyes filled. "People leave." Denise's thumb moved gently over the back of Evelyn's hand. "Some do. My Robert left." Denise's voice lowered. "I'm sorry. And Charlie left too." Charles stopped breathing. He was in the house. He had been in the house every day. But Evelyn's words did not care about facts. They cared about feeling. And to her he had left. Maybe the first time he turned away because she called him by his father's name. Maybe the first time he let a nurse feed her while he answered email. Maybe the first time she cried and he ordered a sedative instead of sitting beside her. He had not abandoned her body. He had abandoned the room where her heart still lived. Denise looked down and Charles saw her swallow hard. "I think Charlie got scared," she said again. Evelyn's tears slipped down both cheeks now. He was such a sweet boy. The words broke something loose inside Charles. Not loudly. No dramatic crash. Just a crack. Deep and clean. He remembered being sick at 10 years old, feverish and shaking under a blanket. His mother had sat by his bed all night cooling his forehead with a washcloth, whispering, "I'm right here, Charlie. I'm right here." He had not known then how much those words cost. A whole night of sleep. A stiff back. Worry. Love. She had given it without counting. Now she was the one lost and frightened. And he had counted everything. Calories. Pills. Blood pressure. Hours. Bills. Risks. Everything except loneliness. Denise reached for a napkin and dabbed Evelyn's tears with the lightest touch. "There you go," she whispered. "No need to hold all that by yourself." Evelyn caught her wrist gently. "Don't tell Charlie I cried." Denise's eyes glistened. "I won't. He worries." Charles covered his mouth. A sound rose in him but he forced it down. Even now. Even through the fog. Even after everything. His mother wanted to protect him. Denise sat back in her chair still holding Evelyn's hand. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes love gets all tangled up. People start protecting each other so hard they forget to hold each other." Evelyn listened. Charles listened too. Denise continued, "But I believe love can still find its way back. Even late. Even after a long time." The words floated across the dining room and entered the shadow where Charles stood. He wanted to reject them. He wanted to call them simple, sentimental, naive. But he could not. Because his mother's face had changed again. The tears were still there, but so was peace. Denise had not erased the pain. She had not forced happiness over it. She had simply sat with it until it became bearable. That was care. Not the chart. Not the pill. This was care. Evelyn leaned back, tired now. The clarity was beginning to fade from her eyes. Charles saw it happen, and it hurt worse than he expected. The brightness dimmed. The sharp lines of memory softened. She looked smaller again. Denise saw it too. "Time to rest?" she asked. Evelyn nodded faintly. Denise stood and moved behind her chair. Not rushing. Never rushing. She adjusted the cushion, checked Evelyn's hands, then gently touched her shoulder. "I'm going to help you back to the sitting room, okay?" Evelyn looked up at her. Confused now. "Do I know you?" Charles closed his eyes. There it was. Gone. Just like that. The door had opened. Then closed. But Denise did not flinch. She smiled with the same warmth as before. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "I'm Denise. I'm your friend." Evelyn studied her face. Then in a small voice she said, "Friend?" "That's right." Denise began guiding her slowly, one careful step at a time. No one asked Denise to love her. No one thanked her. No one promised her a bonus. She just did it. And Charles Whitman, still hidden in the hallway of his own mansion, finally understood the terrible truth. Denise had not broken the rules because she was careless. She had broken them because the rules had forgotten Evelyn was human. She had not given Evelyn pizza to disobey him. She had given Evelyn a piece of her life back. A taste of Friday. A memory of Robert. A glimpse of Charlie. A few golden minutes where Alzheimer's did not win completely. And in those minutes, Denise Carter had done what Charles's fortune could not. She had returned Evelyn's soul to the room. Charles Whitman did not step into the room. Not yet. He stood in the hallway while Denise guided his mother back toward the sitting room, one careful step at a time. Evelyn's hand rested on Denise's arm. Her slippers brushed softly across the floor. The sound was small. Almost nothing. But to Charles it sounded like a verdict. He watched his mother move slowly through the sunlight, tired now, fading back into the fog. 10 minutes earlier she had been laughing. Remembering. Teasing him as a boy. Talking about his father as if Robert Whitman had just walked out to pick up more napkins. Now her eyes were distant again. The door had opened. Then it closed. And Charles had missed his chance to walk through it. Denise settled Evelyn into the chair by the window and tucked the blanket around her knees. She adjusted the yellow cushion behind her back, the one Charles had removed more than once. Evelyn did not resist. She simply leaned into the softness and sighed. "There you go, Miss Evelyn," Denise whispered. "Nice and easy." Evelyn looked up at her. "Are we waiting for someone?" The question split Charles in two. Denise paused, then smiled gently. "Maybe we are." "For Robert." Denise's face softened. "Maybe." Evelyn nodded, satisfied for the moment, and turned toward the window. Charles stood frozen behind the wall. For Robert. Not for him. Never for him. That was what he felt first. Then shame came behind it, deeper and heavier. Because what right did he have to be hurt? He had been there and not there. Present and absent. Paying and hiding. He had moved through that mansion like a manager inspecting a facility, not like a son entering his mother's home. He knew her blood pressure readings. He knew her medication schedule. He knew the exact cost of every doctor, every specialist, every imported supplement, every private nurse who had quit after a few hard weeks. But he did not know that she missed Friday nights. He did not know that the smell of pepperoni could bring back Robert. He did not know that she still remembered him as a boy with greasy fingers stealing toppings from a pizza box. He had known everything. And nothing. Charles lowered his eyes to the briefcase in his hand. It looked absurd now. A rich man's weapon. He had brought it like armor. Like proof of who he was. Charles Whitman, founder, chairman, deal-maker, decision-maker. A man whose signature could move money across continents. A man who did not ask twice. But in that hallway the briefcase felt like a child's toy. What was inside it? Contracts? Reports? Legal drafts? A flight itinerary he had never planned to use. None of it could make Evelyn say his name. None of it could make her laugh. None of it could teach him how to sit beside her without fear. Across the room, Denise picked up the water glass and placed it near Evelyn's chair. She looked toward the dining room, probably thinking about cleaning up the evidence. Evidence. That word struck him hard. He had come home looking for a crime. And found mercy. He had expected carelessness. And found courage. Denise had risked her job, her reputation, maybe her future for a few golden minutes of joy that no medical chart could understand. Charles pressed one hand against the wall. The marble was cold beneath his palm. He thought of the blue pills in the cabinet. How many times had he approved them without question? How many afternoons had Evelyn been quiet not because she was peaceful but because she had been subdued? How many times had her sadness been labeled agitation because it was easier to medicate pain than sit with it? He remembered the nurse's reports. Patient restless. Patient crying. Patient refusing food. Patient calling for deceased husband. The words had sounded clinical, clean, manageable. Now they sounded like distress calls. His mother had been crying out from behind the fog and everyone around her had been trained to quiet her down. Including him. Especially him. Charles shut his eyes. For years he had told himself he was a good son because he spared no expense. He paid for the best. He demanded excellence. He kept the house spotless, the staff accountable, the doctors on call. When other people asked about Evelyn, he always had the right answer. She's stable. Her care team is excellent. We're doing everything possible. Everything possible. The phrase made him sick now. Because he had not done everything. He had not held her hand while she cried. He had not played the songs she loved. He had not asked what Friday meant. He had not sat across from her with a slice of pizza and let her be Evelyn instead of a patient. He had spent millions keeping her heart beating. But he had let loneliness wrap around it like a fist. In the sitting room, Evelyn's head dipped slightly. Denise noticed at once. She pulled the blanket higher and dimmed the light just enough to soften the room, not bury it. Then she sat nearby. Not too close. Not too far. Just there. That was the thing Charles could not stop seeing. Denise knew how to be there. Charles knew how to provide. He knew how to command, purchase, schedule, protect, authorize, replace, and control. But he had forgotten how to be there. Maybe he had never learned. His father had known. Robert Whitman had not been perfect. He had been late to appointments, messy with receipts, careless with socks, terrible with calendars. But he knew how to enter a room and make it warmer. He knew how to make Evelyn roll her eyes and laugh. He knew when to put work down. Charles had spent half his life trying to become more disciplined than Robert. More successful. More respected. More untouchable. Now standing in the shadows, he wondered if he had only become colder. A sound escaped him then. Small. Broken. Denise turned her head. Charles stepped back instinctively, but it was too late. She had heard something. Hello, Denise called softly. Charles did not answer. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs. For one wild second he considered leaving, slipping back through the service door. Getting into the SUV. Going to the airport for real. Pretending he had never seen any of it. He knew how to escape. He had been escaping for years. But then, Evelyn stirred. Charlie, she whispered. Charles's entire body went still. Denise looked at Evelyn, then toward the hallway. Miss Evelyn? The old woman's eyes remained half closed, her voice thin and uncertain. Charlie, don't take all the pepperoni. The words floated through the room. Soft. Faded. Impossible. Charles covered his mouth with one hand. He was 54 years old, worth more money than his childhood self could have imagined, standing in a hallway like a guilty boy caught with his hand in the pizza box. And his mother had found him. Not with her eyes. With memory. With love. With some piece of herself the disease had not managed to destroy. Charles took one step forward. Then stopped again. He was afraid. Not of Denise. Not of being exposed. Of walking into that room and seeing Evelyn's eyes go blank. Of saying mother and receiving nothing. Of learning that the version of him she loved existed only in the past, while the man he had become was no one to her. Denise appeared at the edge of the sitting room. She saw him then. Really saw him. The color drained slightly from her face. Mr. Whitman. Her voice was quiet. No panic. No excuse. No lie. Charles looked at her. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The whole trap stood between them. The fake trip. The disabled cameras. The service door. The pizza boxes in the dining room. The rules broken. The life restored. Denise's chin lifted but her eyes were wet. She was ready for what came next. Ready to be fired. Ready to be blamed. Ready to stand in front of a powerful man and pay the price for giving an old woman one afternoon of happiness. Charles saw all of that. And it broke him more than any apology could. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Denise spoke first. She didn't eat much, she said carefully. Just enough to taste it. I watched her closely. She swallowed fine. Her breathing stayed steady. I know it was against the chart. Charles looked past her at Evelyn, who was dozing in the chair, one hand curled loosely over the blanket. Denise continued, her voice trembling now. She kept asking for Friday. For Robert. For cheese. I thought maybe. She stopped. Swallowed. I thought maybe she deserved to have something that made her happy. Charles stared at her. That sentence should have angered him. Instead, it hollowed him out. She deserved to have something that made her happy. So simple. So obvious. So devastating. Charles had spent years asking what would keep Evelyn alive. Denise had asked what would make her want to be. That was the difference. That was the terrible, beautiful difference. He stepped fully into the sitting room. Denise moved aside at once as if making space for the man who owned the house. But Charles no longer felt like he owned anything. Not the room. Not the moment. Not even the story he had told himself about being a devoted son. He walked toward Evelyn's chair. Slowly, carefully, like a man approaching something holy. His mother slept lightly, her face turned toward the window. There was a trace of sauce at the edge of one fingernail. Denise must have missed it. Charles saw it. And instead of disgust he felt grief. That tiny red mark was proof. Proof she had tasted something. Proof she had returned, however, briefly. Proof he had almost punished the woman who gave it to her. Charles knelt beside the chair. His knees touched the floor. The marble was hard. He had not knelt in that house in years. "Mother," he whispered. Evelyn's eyes fluttered but did not open. Charles reached for her hand then hesitated. Denise watched from behind him. No one moved. Finally, Charles took his mother's hand in his. It was warm, fragile, human. Not a condition. Not a responsibility. Not a problem to solve. His mother. He bowed his head over her hand. And the man who had controlled everything felt something inside him finally give way. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Not loud enough for a boardroom. Not polished enough for a speech. Just broken enough to be true. "I thought I was saving you." His voice cracked. "I thought all of this was love." Evelyn slept on. Denise stood silent. Charles closed his eyes. The house around him no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a place waiting to become a home again. And for the first time in years, Charles Whitman understood the truth he had paid everyone else not to say. He had not been protecting his mother from danger. He had been protecting himself from pain. And in doing so he had left her alone. Not anymore. Evelyn's fingers tightened around Charles's hand. Just a little? Barely enough to feel. But Charles felt it. His head lifted. His eyes filled as he looked at the mother he had almost lost while she was still breathing. Then Evelyn opened her eyes. For one clear second, she stared at Denise. Not as a caregiver. Not as a stranger. As someone from long ago. Her lips trembled. "Patricia," she whispered. The name hit the room like thunder. Charles froze. Patricia. His older sister. The daughter who had died in a car accident at 19. The name no one spoke anymore. The photograph Charles had locked away because his mother cried every time she saw it. Denise went still but she did not pull away. "No, Miss Evelyn," she said softly. "I'm Denise." But Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I thought you weren't coming back." Charles covered his mouth. His whole body shook. All these years he thought Alzheimer's had erased the past. It had not. It had buried it alive. Denise leaned closer and held Evelyn's hand with both of hers. "I'm here now," she whispered. "You're not alone." Charles broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a rich man kneeling on cold marble, finally understanding that grief does not disappear when we stop saying a name. It waits. It waits for a song. A smell. A kind hand. A moment of love brave enough to open the door. Sometimes we think love means controlling every risk, fixing every problem and keeping people safe at any cost. But real love is not only protection. Real love is presence. It is listening. It is remembering what makes someone feel human. So tell me in the comments. Who is someone you wish you had held closer while you still had time? And if this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel because the next story may remind someone they are not alone.